Well, we all know that sometimes the BBC and Sky News, all these media organizations, the mainstream media, could sometimes be biased. And it's an institutional problem. It's not just the reporters or the journalists. It's the people who work in the behind the scenes. One specific person, Lewis Goodall. We all know Lewis Goodall. He used to be a Labour activist. He then joined the BBC. He then moved to Sky News. Now he's back at the BBC in charge of BBC Newsnight, our favourite, definitely biased programme. Lewis Goodall is supposed to be a reporter. That's his job, technically. Not a commentator. Not a political commentator. He's a journalist. And he's slightly crossed the line. And we're going to expose him in this video because he's written for the New Statesman, of all magazines, on how the government's ineptitude created a lost generation. Again, Lewis Goodall and Stephen Bush have worked on this piece, and you can see the pictures of Boris Johnson, Gavin Williamson, and Dominic Cummings for some reason. This is the whole thing. The article is actually okay in terms of, he's talking about the whole A-levels and GCSE results. He technically criticizes all authorities, the SNP, the Welsh Labour Party, and everybody. But deep down, the main target, again, you can see the picture, the front page, is Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings. Again, Dominic Cummings. So this is as the Twitter account Core, it's actually a really good Twitter account, actually should follow it, has talked about how this is top BBC impartiality. The BBC's Newsnight, Lewis Goodall has written this piece, and this is the main paragraph that I found. It says how it is hard not to dwell on the fact that at the heart of this government is a man who mandates the reading of a book entitled Super Forecasting for Political Advisors, who lauds this scientific method and its predictive capacities, and who has forged a remarkable electoral record through the employment of data to understand how voters think. Well, so far, sounds okay. We cannot know the extent of Dominic Cummings' involvement in this sorry story, and it may be that he was not part of it at all. But his approach, so again, people like Lewis Goodall are quite smart. He got what he wanted. All the lefties who read the New Statesman, they're going to read this bit, and in their head, they're just going to remember Dominic Cummings. I mean, he's not even involved, but but in terms of his writing, he gets away with it because he also says, we don't know the extent of his involvement. He might not be part of it at all, but because he's mentioned it already, the reader will assume, remember the first part, that Cummings' name was mentioned, he's probably involved. This issue that we had with the exam results was happening everywhere. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, England, and each one of them had obviously devolved authorities. You cannot blame Boris and Cummings on everything. And I've criticised Boris Johnson's policies a number of times recently. Dan Hodges made a good point. If Lewis Goodall had written a piece criticising the BLM movement or the government for being insufficiently draconian on immigration, every single person defending him would be calling for his head. Again, so he's talking about how we don't want rules, we want our own personal perspective. But Dan Hodges also continues. He says that imagine if Laura Kuenssberg popped up on the front of The Spectator with a piece headlined "How Jeremy Corbyn's Ineptitude Created a Lost Generation." Yes, there will be a meltdown. People, he's talking about, he's defending Lewis Goodall as a journalist. He's saying, he's still a great journalist it's professional, obviously. But you can be a politically neutral broadcast reporter, or you can be a commentator. You can't be both. And that's true. Like, my job, I'm not claiming to be a neutral political reporter. I'm a commentator. Be open about your leanings. Be open about, essentially your agenda, Lewis. He's running the Newsnight program, and in reality, we all know how biased that program has always been, but like how bad it's getting. Now, the issue I have with Lewis Goodall, for those of you who don't know, this is one example, one encounter he had with Dominic Cummings, and Dominic completely destroyed him.
11-0 over the prorogation of Parliament?
I don't have a master plan.
Really? Because people say you do. Well, people say all sorts of things. You say all sorts of things, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right,
so
okay.
everyone watching at home should know, don't watch the news. Because it's
Don't watch the
almost
news?
all...
Is it really?
Yeah.
And why is that?
Well, because they have people like you on asking questions and you don't even know it's the 17th of October or the 19th of October.
Well, no,
That's
I mean,
your
that's
job.
just very,
That's your job to know that, and you don't even know that, do you?
It's just very, very interesting to know just exactly whether or not the Prime Minister is going to be obeying the law. I mean, we can get into kind of, one-upmanship about this, but I actually think it's really, really serious if the Prime Minister of this country is actually trifling and suggesting he might not obey the law. So you can get all funny with me about whether I know a particular date or not, but I think it's really, really important whether or not the Prime Minister of this country is going to obey the law, because if he doesn't obey the law, then I might not choose to obey the law tonight. Nobody might choose to obey the law tonight.
I don't think that's the right attitude. You don't just watch criminals and then say, oh, you're going to become a criminal, do you?
But that's exactly what that's exactly the point.
That's what toddlers do.
That's exactly the point. And the Prime Minister
You're talking like a toddler.
The Prime Minister is the one who is saying that he's not going to obey the law. So if the Prime Minister, the person who with the highest political and legal office in the land, isn't choosing to obey, is suggesting that he might not obey the law, why the hell should any of the rest of us? Answer me that, Mr. Cummings. Or do you not have an answer?
I think you're not a very good journalist, mate. I'm sorry.
Really?
Well, Dominic is right. It's not a good journalist. And the question was stupid. For those of you who don't remember, this is just before Brexit, when Boris Johnson tried to prorogue Parliament. And the question was stupid. The approach was idiotic. He was, chasing around the streets of London. And so it's, instead of trying to answer the question, because, he gave the original answer, Lewis doesn't give up. And so all you have to do is just turn it around and target the actual journalist who's asking all these idiotic questions, because they started it. And I think it was since that moment, I mean, before that, but especially because of that incident, Lewis Goodall always had a thing against Dominic Cummings. Again, every single time, these left-wing mainstream media, they're not even they're a bunch of hacks, but hacktivists, because they are political activists. Every time something happens, Dominic Cummings' name comes up. Someone dies in Syria, Dominic Cummings. Global warming, Dominic Cummings. So that's one. And then you had Konstantin Kisin, the comedian, who's very sound, good friend of mine, who was on the BBC. Actually, they were not expecting Konstantin Kisin to expose the BBC on the BBC. It was about comedians and being kind of controversial, and this is what he said.
But I think an interesting point here as well is in terms of the BBC itself. It seems to me that the BBC has been very heavily focused on the diversity agenda recently, which is a good thing. But one of the things that doesn't seem to be reflected in the diversity is diversity of opinion. There's clearly nobody in that production room at this show who actually said, look, this might annoy half the country. And I think that's telling.
Well, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, her spokesman has said that the BBC should explain why.
So he went on this rant. And the reporter, let's just call them hacktivists, completely ignored what he said. She was like, oh, let's talk about the Prime Minister now. Really? Defend yourself. You getting accused by a comedian of all things. But that's the thing. They have no shame. And I've dealt with a lot of people when it comes to the BBC, especially behind the scenes. There are still some good people, obviously. I'm not saying every single person is the same, but there's a problem with the mentality. When it comes to organizations like Sky News and the BBC. Actually, at times, I would say Sky News is even more biased than the BBC, because the BBC are still kind of struggle with the charter that they have. Whereas Sky News, they only have Ofcom to deal with, so it's slightly more flexible. The New Culture Forum, it's a good channel, by the way, you should check it out. They were talking about this and the difference between reporters and commentators, but also journalists who try to pretend to be like Andrew Neil or Jeremy Paxman. Let's watch this bit and come back.
Well, all we see on the BBC and across the broadcast media is this assumption that the person being interviewed is a liar and they have to be caught out and there's got to be a gotcha moment. Everyone wants to be a Paxman. Paxman used to be an exception to the rule, and now it seems everybody wants to be a Paxman. Now, someone like Andrew Neil, I think, is perfect because we all know that he's right-wing, but that's only visible if you watch him on Twitter. If you see him when he's broadcasting for the BBC, he is faultlessly impartial and he will give each side an equally tough time. And his style of interviewing is excellent during the run-up to an election, for example, or during conference season. But there is no need to have that style of interrogation year-round through every single news channel and in every interview. That's why this type of forum, where everybody actually has a chance to speak, to elaborate and expand upon their views, is far more useful. And if you read the comments under YouTube discussions where you've had controversial columnists, you'll see many people saying, gosh, I actually never liked this person, but now that I've heard them elaborate and expand on their views...
Well, that's a very, very good point in terms of, especially over the last couple of decades, how the mainstream media, every time they have a guest, because they're taught that you have to hold power to account, politicians and everyone, obviously that's true, but I don't think they understand what that means. It doesn't mean that every single time a CEO or a minister or an MP is on your channel, you have to grill, in a sense that, even if they might just be on the show to talk about something soft, some good policy, they always treat the guests as if they're the enemy. And that's the problem. People are getting sick and tired of the mainstream media because it's not watchable anymore. You don't really get someone going on these shows, whether left wing or right wing, and give them a chance to talk and explain what they mean. They don't do this anymore. And I think it's a big problem. Firstly, these guys at the BBC are losing money. They're making cuts. The Metro had this article that just came out in terms of the BBC making a lot of... they're going with austerity. But they're axing the BBC News at 6 and 10 because the audience moving online. I mean, it's true that people are moving away from the mainstream media, but BBC News at 6 and 10 are the most popular shows on BBC News. So, of all programs, why do they have to axe these two? I don't know. And so that's the whole thing with this article. It is talking about how they want to compete now with YouTubers and other podcasters because everyone's going online. The flagship news programs are going. The decision was made as the BBC wants to move more of its children's content online in an attempt to halt declining TV viewing numbers among young people, and Ofcom has approved the plans. The problem you have is that whether it's CBBC or any of the kind of children's content, if kids are going online to watch stuff, with Netflix, with Disney Plus, with all the things that they have access to, I'm pretty sure if they're going online anyway, or YouTube, they don't want to go on BBC iPlayer to watch children's cartoon. The reason children were watching BBC on actual TV was because it was the only option. Not anymore. So the BBC bosses thinking that we're going to move online, so that we're now going to destroy Netflix and Disney Plus. Good luck with that. But this is a point about the mainstream media. They are the old news. We are the media now, as I always say. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new. We have, for those of you who have subscribed for a while, we have big news. I know I've been saying it for the past few days. And that my mission is on this channel is to counter the complacency of the mainstream media, because, as I said, we are the media. So make sure to stay tuned for the next in the next couple of days. We shall have a massive announcement regarding this channel. And if you want to support the channel, become a member. Check out the link in the description, youtube.com/myitc/join. And I'll see you guys in the next video.